is an overcrowded island. In the last 30 years, an increasing population has made its mark on both the urban and rural landscape. Our country has changed forever. England is now the most densely populated country in Europe. We now have more people per square mile than China, Japan or India. Britain has an official population figure of almost 62 million, increasing at an unprecedented rate and putting an unsustainable strain on the fabric of the UK. The evidence is everywhere. On housing, despite periods of frantic house building on both greenfield and brownfield sites, the number of available homes falls woefully short of needs, and limited supply just fuels long-term house price inflation. On services, public services, the NHS, local authorities and the police are stretched thin the length and breadth of the country. On public finances, the cost of an extended benefit system and public pension provision has become unsustainable without radical change. On transport, our transport infrastructure is not coping, and major road and rail network improvements are merely playing catch-up with the population explosion that appears to be out of control.
Population growth at this level is completely unsustainable for our country. There is no indication that it will slow without radical intervention by ourselves.
61.8 million is the official estimate, but successive official figures have been shown to be woefully inaccurate. Many statistical indicators point to the real figure being much higher. And whichever trends you look at, they are all going up, with a significant upswing in recent years. By 2050, Britain's population will swell by 24% to 77 million. In the league table of EU countries, that'll see Britain overtake France and even Germany as the most populated country.
The consequences of this are widespread on the space we have to move around in as individuals, on the ethnic makeup of our population, on the provision of housing, on infrastructure, and of course on every aspect of our lives.
Britain is full. We are a small, overcrowded island, and we're adding to the population at a rate that is simply unsustainable. We need radical solutions to address this problem.
The population trends are startling. The Office of National Statistics data reveals that the recent significant upswing in Britain's population growth is entirely fueled by immigration, which is around 5 times the natural rate of population growth. This is unprecedented. Yet, it is only since the 1990s that immigration has actually added to the population total.
The upswing is due to, almost entirely, immigration, which itself is split into 2 parts: immigration from the EU countries of Eastern Europe and continued immigration from Asia, particularly the Indian subcontinent and Africa. We see that this has brought about a sense of strain and pressure on all the services, and it also, of course, threatens the sort of things that we're keen to achieve in the future, namely a reduction in total CO2 emissions, general energy use, and of course land use itself. But over and above that is the huge anxiety which this population level and the prospective increase in it has brought to the native British people.
You get the impression that this is an overcrowded country and that there's more and more people coming in all the time, and that it's putting a strain on our services and such like, and that the taxpayer's footing the bill for it.
In another 5-6 years, you've just sat in traffic all the time and you won't be moving nowhere, full stop.
I think it is a worry. Drain on resources, much more crowded, things going up, and yeah, it's a concern.
I think there is an overcrowding issue. I don't know, especially since the EU expansion into the east, there's been a lot more coming over.
Yeah, it's really crowded here. More people are coming because they think that England is a country that's a bit free.
I think we have lost control. I don't think we've got any control now. I think a lot of people feel very strongly about it.
And there's too many people going like in courses, to like foreign people, don't know how speak in English, and like they're going in courses. It's like they're not really getting nothing out of it.
It's a big worry, isn't it? I'm worried for my children and my grandchildren now.
It's beginning to get like a car park everywhere in the roads, our pollution, everything about this country now is not good news at all, no.
Well, now in Bradford there's more multicultural than there is of people who live here, who were born here.
Of course, something's got to break somewhere.
These comments are not isolated views. This graph reveals over time the percentage of people who say immigration is the most important issue facing Britain. The trend follows very closely the figures for net migration over the same period, and there is no sign that it is set to reverse.
Well, it means this: even on government figures, we expect to see something like 7 million additional people in England by 21 years from now. And this means, in fact, something like 7 additional cities the size of Birmingham.
In the next 10 years, 3 million new homes need to be built in the southeast of England alone. These homes need to be built to accommodate the current and intended waves of immigrants.
The largest single factor contributing to the number of new households being formed is net immigration. That's a new home for immigrants every 6 minutes.
A new baby is born in the UK every 40 seconds. A quarter of those babies have a foreign-born parent, and in parts of London it's even higher at 3/4 of all babies born. Significantly, the UK birth rate has seen an upswing in recent years, up 11% since 2004, and immigrant mothers accounting for the majority of that increase.
The foreign-born population is growing while the British-born population is declining.
On current immigration trends and births to immigrants, the native English population will become a minority in their own country within the next 2 to 3 generations. Now, how can that be a sensible immigration policy?
And that trend is now showing itself in our schools. We're experiencing a new baby boom. In particular, the Muslim population multiplied 10 times faster than the rest of society. The knock-on effect will be seen in 7 years' time. Schools will be swamped with increased demand, a result of the unprecedented increase in UK births.
Up to 1997, legitimate immigration into the UK from outside the European Union was relatively controlled. However, the enormous expansion in the number of migrants since then has been due to 4 main factors.
Membership of the European Union, illegal immigration, asylum applications, and the former Labour government's commitment to mass immigration. The most significant factor that has accelerated the growth in population originated here in Brussels, the seat of power of the EU. EU Directive 2004/38 formally opened UK borders to any EU citizens to come to work, live and raise their families in the UK.
And every other EU state was supposed to accept migrants, yet the UK appeared to be receiving a disproportionate share.
You have to ask yourself why so many people from around the world come to Britain, a little island off the coast of Europe. It's because we make it too easy to come here, and we pay people benefits when they get here.
As for illegal migrants, Britain is also the destination of choice. For many, Calais is the point of entry to the UK by whatever means.
This afternoon, the seething anger of the migrants over their treatment erupted. They accuse the French of treating them like animals.
This is just one small example of the tension building here. It is difficult to disagree with the mayor of Calais when she says this town has reached breaking point.
Requesting asylum is easier with the British than in France. The asylum seeker is given accommodation and receives £31 to £40 a week when the annual salary of the average Eritrean is around £130.
As the accusations fly and the number of migrants soar, the battle lines are the same. These are tenacious people prepared to risk everything to reach Britain.
In England will be facilities for us. Here, no facilities.
Britain may not want these migrants, but in this squalid camp, the men dream only of crossing the Channel and of completing their long journey.
The hand of the EU is evident in many aspects of the population crisis the UK is facing. In a recent survey, 80% responded that they think we must control UK borders, and 59% believe that EU membership prevents Britain from controlling the inflow of immigrants. Clearly, something has to be done now, but the UK government appears powerless to oppose the will of Brussels. And it is set to get worse. The right of entry into Britain has been granted to all EU states, including the newest EU members, such as Bulgaria, Romania and Latvia, to name but a few. Immigration from these Eastern European countries has been growing at an unprecedented rate.
Some people may have hoped that the new coalition government under David Cameron would get to grips with it, but we've seen recently that David Cameron has said that he's angry that Turkey isn't being allowed entry to the European Union. Now, if Turkey comes into the European Union, it means that another 72 million people will have an automatic right of entry to Britain. Even if only a small percentage of them decide to come, that's another enormous wave of immigration. How can this possibly be construed as in the interests of the British people?
Every year, millions of people arrive here in the UK, including businessmen, tourists and students. But how many of them actually leave? Well, nobody knows, because historically, the UK government hasn't kept embarkation records.
We are the least controlled country of the English-speaking world, far, far less than the United States or Canada or Australia and New Zealand, for example, and much less even than some of the European countries, our neighbours in France, for example. But we need controls both inward and outward, as every other country does.
There is a clear and urgent need to improve the data and information about gross and net migration flows to and from the UK.
There is also, of course, a major problem with visas, particularly from African and some Asian countries. And that is this: somebody comes in, there's no formal check on their ability to maintain themselves in this country. So we have the situation in which people can come in on a visitor's visa of 6 months and then simply not go.
Student visas are also an area of widespread abuse. The number of visas handed out to overseas students in 2009 was 300,000, up 30% on the previous year.
The fact that immigration accounts for the bulk of UK population growth has very profound and continued effects upon the demographic makeup of Britain.
1 in 9 of our population were born overseas. In London, that figure is 1 in 3. This trend, accelerated under the former Labour government, is increasingly turning Britain into a patchwork of disparate ethnic groups.
The Labour Party's blatant experiment in diversity and integration appears to be an abject failure. The present government has no effective plans to address the issue.
Well, the pace of immigration into Britain is without doubt a major issue in this country, and the new coalition government have told us all it'll be addressed. They're going to control those that come into this country. There's going to be a rigorous points-based system, and all will be well, so we can stop worrying about it. I'm afraid that's just not the case, because we have no control whatsoever over those that come to this country from within the European Union. And that means we have an open door to nearly 500 million people. Worse than that, of course, is countries like Croatia, even countries like Turkey, are due to join the EU over the course of the next few years. So the truth is that we cannot have our own immigration and border policy and remain part of this European Union, so we have a choice.
And that choice needs to be made very soon. And it appears that leaving the European Union is the only way to regain control of the UK population.
One of the main reasons that we're told that we must have immigration is for economic benefit. But all the arguments to this are totally spurious, and we've now seen, it's been officially shown to be the case, that 98% of the jobs created from 1997 to 2009 went to migrants and not to native British workers. How can that possibly help our economy?
The argument that sustained net immigration is needed to fill vacancies and that immigrants do the jobs that locals cannot or will not do is fundamentally flawed. We found no systematic empirical evidence to suggest that net immigration creates significant dynamic benefits for the resident population in the UK.
Britain does not suffer from labour shortages. Indeed, for every vacancy, there are 5 unemployed.
Amongst graduates, there are an average of 70 applicants for every vacancy. We are seeing that rising unemployment is the source of widespread anxiety and dissent across the country.
The impact is going to be jobs for the up-and-coming generation.
There's such as relatives of mine who can't get jobs due to immigrants coming in, taking all jobs, and there needs to be tougher laws set on it.
Around 1,000 angry demonstrators gathered opposite the Total oil terminal after a construction project was given to an Italian company. Unions say the firm has excluded Britons from the contract and has shipped in workers from abroad instead.
And this hasn't just happened, this has been going on for years. It has come to a head now, where you've got to do something about it, or you might as well just turn over. It's a country as well, the country's dying. Simple as that.
Although clearly benefiting employers, immigration that is in the best interest of individual employers is not always in the best interest of the economy as a whole.
This whole population issue is one of space, not race. Our current immigration policy means that we're trying to cram a never-ending number of people into a finite space. It is simply unsustainable. What we have to have is a commitment to end the age of mass immigration and a commitment that any future immigration is on a strictly controlled and limited basis and only where it can be shown to be in the interests of the British people. We need an immediate freeze on immigration for permanent settlement until we've put proper border controls in place. Then we need a strict points-based immigration system so that we can select and control who has the right to come and live here. We should of course allow people to come here to work, but on a strict work permit basis for a limited time span and only where we cannot find a British worker to fill the post. Concerning the 1 million or so illegal immigrants that we have here, there must be no blanket amnesty for illegal immigrants. We must have a strict process for dealing with them, and overstaying a visa itself must be a criminal offence with penalties.
Radical measures could make a difference. However, there is one sting in the tail awaiting us all. Hidden away in the detail of the infamous EU Lisbon Treaty is the new common immigration and asylum policy, and it applies to migrants from both the EU and from outside. Ultimately, the EU will dictate UK immigration policy.
It is the stated aim of those in the European Union that we will have a common immigration and asylum policy within the next 2 years. And that means not only will we not have control over people from other EU states coming to Britain, we will lose control from those outside the European Union that can come, live, work and settle in this country. And if it goes through, it'll mean at the next general election, there'll be no point even discussing immigration and border controls.
The UK can regain control of its borders and bring stability to the unprecedented growth in population we've seen in recent years. With the right policies, it is achievable. But as a matter of urgency, the first step must be for the UK to leave the European Union. Only then can Britain be free to implement its own policies to tackle this most important of issues.